several people ask me, when they hear the story, they're like, so when did you begin to know? Like, how long did it take you to get that courage up to leave? And, when did you start to question? And I said, well, I started to question 5 days in.
And
right?
we do this. We do this. We get married to people we know not to get married to. We move to places we know not to move to. We take jobs we know.
Absolutely.
Yes, we know this.
Right. Because, I left the convent, which then once I started to really pursue, like, this isn't right, it still took another 3.5 years, right?
It took me 2 years to leave my job after I knew I wanted to leave.
Right.
So I totally understand that.
And I think a lot of people are in that position, right? Which is why I think it's important for them to hear stories like ours, because it doesn't mean you're bad or you're weak or anything. It takes a heck of a lot of courage to get to the point of saying, I made a decision that is no longer working for me.
Hi, I'm Erin Marcus, former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business. Welcome to the Ready Yet podcast. We're excited to bring you more than 100 episodes of interviews and insights designed to help entrepreneurs get the financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business and a life they're proud of. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. And I'm really excited to share my guest story with you today because it's a new one for me. You won't be shocked once you hear it why this is not everyone's everyday story. It is a lovely, unique story, so I'm excited. Janet Cobb and I are part of a large networking group here in the Chicago suburbs, Chicagoland. It's actually nationwide now. We both are success strategists for that group, where we offer our help to the members of the group. And then Janet and I had a conversation, and I was just like, we need to tell more people this. This is awesome. So before we dive in to your very unique view on the world, Janet, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do a little bit more officially?
Hi, I'm Janet Cobb, and I am a life transformation coach, primarily to women across the country. I work with women who are feeling stuck or anxious or just something's not quite right, and help them gain clarity, confidence, and courage to find their next iteration and to find joy.
Awesome. And one of the things that I love sharing with people is our entrepreneurial journey, right? How did we get to where we are? Because there's so many lessons in everybody's story. And how did I hear it say, the thing that makes you uniquely you is also the thing that connects you to everyone else, right? It really is true. Like, the more personalized and unique we think we're being, the more we're actually connecting to other people. So when did you decide? I often liken it to falling off a cliff. The decision to go into the entrepreneurial world is like falling off a cliff. Maybe you jumped, maybe you were pushed, but at the end of the day, you are free falling off the cliff, right? So where did that begin for you?
So interestingly enough, the seed was planted in childhood, and then I ignored it. And
good job. We all do that, right? Exactly.
Right. What do you want to be when you grow up? Kind of thing. Right? But when it really, the catalyst was that I had spent my entire career working in Catholic institutions, and in 2015, that career imploded. And the first thing that I realized was I can't continue to work in Catholic institutions anymore. And then by that afternoon, I can't have a boss anymore.
Interesting.
And
that's a huge leap.
Yeah. Well, for years I had felt stifled. And the phrase that made me jump from I can't work in Catholic institutions to I can't have a boss was the person in the institution where I was said, we don't need anyone, we don't need your big ideas. We just need a simple school. I said, well, then I'm the wrong person for you, because I am filled with big ideas. I go into places and I transform them. I see a problem and I fix it. And if you don't want big ideas, then it's too stifling. And by that afternoon, as I was, sort of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life.
What am I going to do when I grow up? Right.
Yeah. I can't have anyone else tell me to stifle or put myself under a bushel basket or whatever. Right.
That's so interesting, because as I'm listening to you say this, one of the assumptions that I've made about your journey is probably more similar than I had thought to people working in corporate. It was just in a different format, because full transparency, I'm not a religious person. I'm not an anti-religious person, but I'm not, you know what I mean? There's people who are, and I know a lot of people who religion does great things for them. It just doesn't land for me, right? My Jewish brother is very involved in the Catholic Church that his children go to school at, right? So right. I'm not anti-religion at all, but I have an opinion or a potentially false impression that a church-based career or a religious-based career, really doesn't have to be a Catholic church, it could be any of them, is even more, not controlling, but more narrowly defined than even a corporate career. And Absolutely. Because I had a corporate career, but I was allowed to be an entrepreneur within corporate. And so for you to, in one day, I don't know, maybe it's just an extreme version of what corporate people go through when they may come to that decision.
I'd have to say the implosion of the career was a long time coming. And I knew several times throughout the iteration that things weren't working. And I always maintained hope, right? I maintained hope.
Right. We all do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Another place might be the right place for me, or, so, the first iteration, of course, was, I didn't mention that the first version of my career was in a Catholic convent, right? I was a nun for 13 years.
I love this. Nun to entrepreneur. I've got books, movies. Seriously, fantastic.
But talk about restrictive, right?
Right.
And I was in a conservative group. So, we lived in community. I wore a habit. We had a very regimented schedule, and I was constantly pushing those boundaries. And I always
they had to love you. Love you.
But what I found in all of the iterations, every school I went to, every organization I went to, was they loved me at the beginning because I had enthusiasm and ideas. And then, wait, your ideas are getting too big or too different.
Well, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, that is such a perfect example of believe people when they tell you who they are.
Right.
You never hid it.
Right.
They love the idea of you. They didn't like the reality.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
People like a different voice. They like a different perspective until it really pushes you to change and undo the structures that have been the foundation of the way things have been done forever.
Right. I want to go into that a little bit because I think I'm going to give you another version of that because I really want the listener to think about where is this happening to them and what are they doing in response to it? Because you stayed however long in that role and then went through several iterations before you were able to start to do things more and more on your own terms. I'm going to give it a weird analogy here. in my dating history, because I'm a little goofy, I'm a little nuts, I'm a little out there, I'm high energy, it's all sorts of fun. I have often attracted guys who were intrigued by the show.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They were impressed with the show. It looked like a lot of fun until you realized in the relationship, I'm only going to ever do things on my terms. And I need a lot of, right. Exactly. You're right. So here's two extremely different versions of what you and I have both done. And
Right.
so for the listener, where does that happen in your life? And what are you letting it do to you or stop you from doing? Like, how easy it would have been for you to tell yourself you were wrong. You had to be the one to change.
Right.
Or for me in a relationship, because these were very nice guys. They weren't bad guys. I've never dated anyone abusive or addictive, or it would have been very easy for me to go with what my mother wanted and marry the guy who seemed so great. And he was very nice to me, but he didn't get it. Right.
Right. Exactly. And I think the issue there is, if you are shutting yourself down in one area of your life, you're likely doing it in other areas. Right. So, and work, much like relationships, are a very big chunk of life.
Yes, exactly.
Right. I mean, your romantic relationship and your job are the two most time consuming pieces of any person's life for the chunk of life.
That's
right.
Absolutely.
And motherhood, if you're a mother. Right. But if you aren't able to be yourself, and if you feel like you're constantly hitting walls, that isn't a good thing. And you have to ask yourself why it is. Right. Now, hopefully it's not happening in both, but if it's happening in one, your tendency is probably that it's happening at some level somewhere else. So I think it's important to look at your entire, the holistic.
The holistic,
person.
right? The phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You said it best.
I would love to take credit for that, but that was not my original phrase.
Okay.
I've heard that from several different people. And I would imagine in what you do now, your experience, you can hone in on that, like, boom, right? Like,
absolutely. When someone
settling,
yes.
right?
Right. Or
stifling.
Stifling. You don't have your voice. Where is your voice in this? I think is really important to, particularly women. We're taught to be nice. We're taught to, be of service. We're taught to put the other person first, more so than men, I think.
More so than men. And what I love about what you're saying, and what if instead of thinking, because I think, to your point, this is what we're taught, if we act this way, we're nice, and if we act this way, we're not nice, as if it's an either or, as if I can't have a voice and be a good person.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I think also how we're raised definitely impacts how quickly we are able to undo that voice. Right. I think some women are raised by strong women who are taught to be strong, right. And independent and those sorts of things. But for many people, do your best and be a good girl, and, all of those things.
How did you find the courage? Because I will tell you, it was scary for me to leave corporate. It was scary for me to tell my mother, I'm leaving a 6-figure job to jump into the unknown. But nobody was shocked about Erin having a loud mouth with a big opinion. Like, this was not a new thing from me, right?
Right.
I was always jumping out of planes and doing weird things. So I would imagine, however, leaving what you left that's a little different. That's like a bigger version of that conversation. So how is that? You didn't just have to break free from your situation, but the judgment. I mean, oh my
Oh,
God.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because remember, I took vows, right? And
Right. I just got a paycheck. Right. It was,
right.
I mean, I had a great job, but there were no vows. In fact, there wasn't even a contract.
Right. I mean, I had gone all the way through, and I did 9 years of training before I took those vows. And then I took those vows, and then 3 years later
Wow.
said, oops,
Oops,
I made a mistake.
do you even remotely, and I'm going to say yes and no, the courage, like that's no small thing.
Absolutely. It was it. So several people ask me, when they hear the story, they're like, so when did you begin to know? Like, how long did it take you to get that courage up to leave? And, when did you start to question? And I said, well, I started to question 5 days in.
And
right?
we do this. We get married to people we know not to get married to. We move to places we know not to move to. We take jobs we know.
Absolutely.
Yes. So yes, we know this.
Right. Because, I left the convent, which then once I started to really pursue, like, this isn't right, it still took another 3.5 years.
It
right.
took me 2 years to leave my job after I knew I wanted to leave.
Right.
So I totally understand that.
And I think a lot of people are in that position, right? Which is why I think it's important for them to hear stories like ours, because it doesn't mean you're bad or you're weak or anything. It takes a heck of a lot of courage to get to the point of saying, I made a decision that is no longer working for me. And it wasn't a bad decision. I don't regret 1 minute of the 13 years I spent in the convent, and I don't regret 1 minute of the 20 years that followed, or 30 years that followed, where I still worked in Catholic schools and Catholic churches and Catholic institutions, right? It was all part of my growth and what I had to go through. And someone very early on in my young years said, never judge yesterday's decisions on today's grace and knowledge, right?
So true.
We make decisions with the resources and the knowledge and the wisdom that we have in the moment. And it doesn't mean that when we learn something new, that makes the original decision bad. It just means we need to make a new one.
Loving what you're learning here and interested in more? Check out our free Facebook group and join us at Conquer Your Business Community to find even more tips and tools designed to help you get out of reaction mode and into conquering your own business.
And so that, I think, is what people need to hear if they're in the middle of that struggle.
Absolutely. Right? And I love that you're saying that. I've had previous conversations, and it's something that I'm very aware of right now. There is a very big problem in this country in the way we think, where we are being told the only way to believe in something is to make somebody else wrong.
Correct. Right.
And I love what you're saying, because I feel very strongly against that. And I think that undercurrent is causing problems that don't need to happen, regardless of where you land on any decision.
Well, and it's true in entrepreneurship. How many, people do you hear say the only way to be an entrepreneur is this way or that way, right? Because the other piece of I never want to have a boss is, a few months later, I realized I don't ever want to be a boss.
Good to know, right?
Right? Because I had lots of ideas. I'm an idea generator, right? So I had lots of ideas, and I I had a patent pending on a machine that I was.
Oh, that's cool. I'm intrigued by that because I am fantastic at what I do. And one of the things I don't ever have is an inkling of a new product. Like that is not a thing in my head at any given time.
Right. You provide services.
Right.
You
I
have
know how to do marketing.
services.
I know how to message. I know how to help people with their mindset. And there has been 0 times in my entire life where my boyfriend will say to me, oh, here's the next $1 million idea. That has never happened for me, like ever.
So I have had it happen a lot where I have an idea and a few months later it's a thing.
Right? Because that energy is out there in the universe and it landed on someone who took action on it, right?
Exactly. And I'm not what I learned quickly as I was doing pitch contests and having meetings and all sorts of stuff. It's like, but I don't want to have to pay attention to quality control. That was a thing, right? It was like, I'm too creative, right? If tomorrow I have a new idea, I'm going to do this one thing differently, right? So,
and so one of the, as I'm listening to you talk, and I keep going back to every potentially false, some accurate opinions and beliefs I have about being a nun based on zero, I'm Jewish, okay, based on zero actual information, to pitch contests.
Exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things that I want to point out, because when I talk to people about you can do anything you want, it's not, you don't have to be me to do it, right? You don't have to be Erin, there's no such thing as Erin can do it because she's a little nuts and she's really loud and she's not scared to walk into a room of strangers and,
Right.
And so many times people will say, well, you can do it because you're XYZ, you're extroverted, you're this, you're that. And you and I, and Tammy, we both know this woman, Tammy, and I have the same dynamic where you are such a magnificent example of being just as courageous, of being just as brave, as being just as entrepreneurial, and a completely different background and a completely different energy. And it's so needed.
Right. Because the reality is you have to be true to yourself. Right. And you have to identify the things that you value. I value creativity more than I value quality control.
Clearly, right?
So I can't put a food product out to market, although I had some great ideas. Right?
The FDA will be knocking on your door. Right?
Right, exactly. Right. The machine product that I had the patent pending for, it was designed around an entire enterprise that needed people, workers to work. And that's what I realized. No, I don't want to manage people. I don't want my success or failure to be reliant on the work ethic of other people.
So what you're talking about, and this is, you're like filled with brilliant things. You're talking about iteration and trying things and failing or deciding it's a no. And instead of making yourself wrong, and instead of saying, I sucked at this, I failed at this, I can't do this, you went, clearly not for me.
Yes.
What is for me?
Right.
And without all of the baggage that so many people attach to themselves, when really you're just iterating and learning about what is for you.
Right, exactly. Because if you have to try what you're being driven to try, and if it's not right, then move on. But I think this starts in childhood too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I know as a parent of 3 that the dirty looks I got from other mothers when my children would join some activity, soccer or karate or whatever. And if they didn't like it, I let them quit. And they were like, but they signed up. You have to teach them responsibility and follow through. No. I have to teach them to be true to themselves and to know that one decision made one day does not dictate the rest of your life, or, your next 6 months or your next year, right? That you can make a new decision if something isn't right for you, if something doesn't fit. And a lot of parents, they can't get there. They want to teach responsibility or follow through, or,
Well, and again, why are these diametrically opposed concepts?
Right.
Why are they either or? Now, I will say when I coach my clients, there are certain times I can tell when they're not doing something that they said they wanted to be doing, but it's because of fear. But that has a completely different energy than what you're talking about. And one of the things in my entrepreneurial journey that I think has helped me, and clearly you figured it out way before I did, is to differentiate fear stopping me and I don't want to do this. Those are two different feelings.
Absolutely. And you have to be listening to what your heart is saying, not what everybody else is saying, not what, your mother or your father's voice might be saying,
or
in my case,
the church
superior.
literally.
Oh, God. Right. What is your gut saying, and what are you feeling when you're engaged in things? That's the key. It's like, how do activities and actions and situations make you feel? How does your body react? What goes on in your head? What emotions are
learning how to interpret it?
Yeah.
Very cool.
So that's the key.
So how did you get to the point where you figured out, because I know from talking to you about what you're doing now for people, you're very passionate about it. It doesn't sound like something you're going to decide is wrong for you tomorrow.
Right.
You're in it for
yes.
You've landed.
Well, I've been doing it for 7 years full time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hundreds of people.
How do you do that? How do you go from a food item that I can't quality control deliver, because it's gonna be different every time. I don't want people working for me. That's another product, to going to what it is that you've been doing and coaching.
So I have always been a coach, right? I remember very on in my career as a teacher.
I'm envisioning you leading an uprising within the company.
Well, I had my moments for sure. I had my moments, and even my process of leaving, because I said it was a conservative group and they had very secretive processes for leaving. And I even bucked that and changed the entire way that people were able to leave the community.
We need more Janets in this world, just in general. Just in general.
Awesome. But I think the key for me was that I have always been a very encouraging person, a very supportive person, a person who can take one thing and look at it 7 different ways. Mm-hmm. And my background is diverse enough to, and not just religion wise. I think I've always found myself living in a few different worlds at one time. So I grew up in poverty in a government housing project on welfare, but went to school across town at a Catholic school. My neighborhood was primarily people of color. My school was primarily white. So at home, I was the white girl who went to the Catholic school. And then at school, I was the poor
totally
girl.
Understand. I was one of 6 Jewish kids in the entire school. Right. Mostly of color, every country you've ever imagined.
Right. Yeah. And then I lived in Asia for 7 years. I certainly stood out there, but I learned so much, right? I was young. I was always the youngest nun in any house I was at, and a lot of them were senior citizens, right? So there's always been this, I can always see a different perspective because
and you
I've been
learn
exposed to so much.
what I learned from my version of that, of being in several different worlds, was that people are just people.
Absolutely.
That
Yes.
people are just people.
And our fears and concerns and our needs are all the same. They manifest differently because of society, primarily. Like men and women, boys and girls, we have the same innate needs and desires and dreams and fears. But society says we have to handle them differently, right? Male, female, black, white, I mean, young,
Everything,
old,
absolutely.
all of it, right? So just bringing all of those different perspectives, I think I realized that there are so many people who can't cut through the noise, and they just turn in circles and run in 7 different directions because they haven't yet landed on clarity of who they want to be, what their values are, how they want to interact with the world.
And that they're even allowed to pick. And that they're
Absolutely.
even allowed to choose.
They even have choice. Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I took all of that and realized the best thing would be to be able to offer that to other people. So that's how I landed in coaching. For a while, I even was presented myself more as a consultant. That was the first thing. It was like, oh, because a consultant can come in and do a thing and then leave and, leave a place better than they left
it. Doesn't have, you don't have to come
Right.
back and worry if the quality control is there.
Right. Exactly.
Do with this what you will.
But then I realized more than doing something for someone, helping them find the tools so they can do it themselves, right? So someone doesn't have to come back and do it for them. Or because, if we live long enough, what we decide at 30 is going to need to be, something else is going to need to be decided at 40 or 50 or whatever, right? So
Absolutely.
Why not equip people with the skills and the tools rather than trying to do something for them?
So let's wrap it up with what's next. Or do you even know, or do you even worry about it?
I certainly don't worry about it. But for me, what I'm in the stage I'm in right now is that I love coaching and I will continue to coach. But I'm also wrapping in or reintegrating things from previous iterations of my life, more speaking and more retreat work.
Oh, nice.
And sort of group coaching, that sort of thing,
Very cool.
which I haven't done much of in a long time. So yeah, that's where I am. I'm hoping to reach more people who I think could really use the encouraging accountability I offer.
And the perspective and the leadership, right? The lead by example version.
Right. I've certainly been there, done that for many, many things. And so seeing someone who has already been through what you've been through or something very similar, I think we talked about everyone's fears and desires being the same, right? There is a universality to experiences as at the same time as there is a very personal experience. So learning to balance that and not just assuming that someone's very personal experience is something that you felt universally or what, right? Like,
right. Yes. No, it's the empathy is what you're talking about. The ability to be present and empathetic. And instead of
Not
making it about
imposing.
you, right? Instead of me, it's not a default skill. It's not a default thing that people do, because the human brain we think about ourselves. This is how it works. So
Right.
the ability to hold space and be empathetic for someone in their personal journey, it's invaluable. So I seriously, you need to be in front of a lot more people and giving this message to a lot more people. I can't, right? I'm fully in support of those endeavors. And if people want to continue this conversation with you, because I seriously highly recommend, I think you have so much to offer in that lane. And there's so much, I'm no longer available for the suffering that is going on in that lane. Like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
People don't have to feel that way. What is the best way for people we will put all the links in the show notes that we can, but what is the best way for people to reach out and learn more about you and have conversations with you?
So my website is janetmarycobb.com. It's very simple. And there is a link for a contact form or scheduling a 15-minute call with me, anything like that. That's the best place to find me. And, I'm on the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, but best place is janetmarycobb.com.
janetmarycobb.com. Awesome. Highly, highly recommend. Hope people reach out to you. Thank you for sharing your story with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been awesome. Loved learning even more about you. And I do hope people take you up on that, because I think you have a lot of things that you can help them with.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. As do you, of course, but your audience knows that.